If you turn with me in your Bibles to Psalm 90, the 90th Psalm, the word of the Lord is as follows. And those of you who don't mind standing for the reading of the word of God, we ask that you'll stand now. Lord, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations. Before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the whole world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You turn people back to dust, saying, return to dust, you mortals. 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by, or like a watch in the night. Yet you sweep people away in the sleep of death. They are like the new grass of the morning. In the morning it springs up new, but by evening it is dry and withered. We are consumed by your anger and terrified by your indignation. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins, in the light of your presence. All our days pass away under your wrath. We finish our years with a moan. Our days may come to 70 years or 80, if our strength endures. Yet the best of them are but trouble and sorrow, for they quickly pass, and we fly away. If only we knew the power of your anger. Your wrath is as great as the fear that is your due. Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Thus far the word of the Lord. Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Eugene Peterson, in his translation of this passage, puts that last verse in these words: oh, teach us to live well. Teach us to live wisely and well. I want to deal with today this subject of living well. Living well. The past 2 weeks have been somewhat surreal for us. Indeed, the country, the recent sudden and tragic deaths of Kobe and Gianna Bryant, John, Kerry, and Alyssa Altobelli, Sarah and Peyton Chester, Christina Mauser, and Ara Zubayan, seem to have visited this generation with an experience known to every other generation before it. It is the experience of good people dying young. Those whose lives presumably had a long runway ahead of them were cut short with neither rhyme nor reason. Time does not permit me to name all of the names of well and lesser known individuals whose sudden deaths caused us to pause and forced us to raise significant questions about the nature and value of life. Looking out among you, I could just speak some of your generation's occurrences. Tammy Terrell, Jackie Wilson, Bruce Lee. I mean, you know, it's bad when the king of kung fu dies young and early. Donny Hathaway, Phyllis Hyman. The names go on and on and on. And I wish that I could just leave that in terms of the unexpected, the sudden, the tragic, the premature, being those from a distance to us. But as I look out upon you, I know that that's not the case. Because there are those in this room at Beatties Ford Road, there are those of you at Independence, there are those of you at South Charlotte whose lives have been singed by the premature, unexpected, sudden and seemingly senseless deaths of children, of grandchildren, of spouses, of siblings, of parents, of cousins, of nieces and nephews, and of friends. Good people dying young, dying too soon. The predominance of this particular tragedy has been inescapable. Between the 24-hour news cycle and social media, there's been almost an overdose of coverage. And whatever else you may have gathered from the coverage, the one thing that has stuck with me is that life on earth is never as sound, as secure, or as safe as it would seem. And that we are all subject to the random nature of circumstances beyond our control. The writer of Ecclesiastes sums it up in these words: people can never predict when hard times might come. Like fish in a net or birds in a trap, people are caught by sudden tragedy. It's sobering to know that regardless of how well we seek to insulate ourselves from the risk of the tragic, we are only one innocent or seemingly innocuous choice away from exposing ourselves to what is outside of our control. You see, had the pilot decided to continue to ascend 100 more feet rather than turn left in a rapidly rising terrain, or if they, like others at the Atlantic Aviation, were grounded due to weather, life might be much different. One innocent choice, one choice that they made the day before. Nothing wrong with the choice that they made, but it put them, that one choice put them into a situation that could lead to being outside of their control. So much of their story, and so much of the stories of the people we've known and loved, has ended with what ifs, if onlys, and whys. That's the question that dogs you, because that question is seldom answered. God answers other questions. He seldom answers the why question, because why something happened does not change the fact that it happened. And what God often desires for us to know is not why it happened, but who he is to you now. That it has happened. When Mary and Martha go to Jesus, when Jesus shows up 4 days with their brother being buried, after they sent him an email before Lazarus died, and Jesus doesn't show up, and they asked him this question: Lord, if you had been here, our brother would not have died. In other words, they asked Jesus, why did you not come sooner? Why did you allow our brother to die? And Jesus never answers that question. But here's what he does say: I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live, and whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. In other words, it's not why something happened, it's who I am to you that I can now affect your life now. We are left to come to terms with the notion that the life of faith is fraught with mystery, and that the life of faith must come to see the person of God as being enough when questions are not answered. And further, since we have little control over how long we have to live, we must concern ourselves with how well we live. You see, I wish I could promise you that I knew how long I would live, but I don't know that. What I have to determine is, since I don't know how long I will live, I must determine how well I will live. And that has to be everybody's determination. It's not how long you live, it's how well you live. Because there are people who live long, but they don't live well. And there are those whose lives were cut short, but they lived the fullest, and they lived well. That's what Psalm 90 is all about. Moses is working out and working through how a life of faith confronts the brief and tentative nature of life. He speaks of people being like new grass that grows in the morning, but by evening it's dry and it's withered. He speaks of our days coming to 70 years, and 80 if strength endures. And yet in the best of those there's trouble and sorrow, for they quickly pass and fly away. And that leads Moses to pray this one prayer: teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. The New Living Translation puts it, teach us to realize the brevity of life so we may grow in wisdom. But Eugene Peterson puts it like this: oh, teach us to live well. Teach us to live wisely and well. Now, as I'm looking at these kids up here, one of the things that's important for you as kids, I know it seems like one day seems like a year, and that 1 week seems like a decade, and that you never gonna get out of your parents' house. How many of y'all can't wait to get out of your parents' house? I know you can't wait. Lord, if I can just get out this house, life will be well. Life will be good. Life will be fabulous. I'll be able to set my own rules, do my own thing. But guess what? When you step out your parents' house to live by your own rules, do your own thing, that's when you got your own bills to pay. That's when you got your own bills. You got your own rent to pay. You got your own cable to take care of. You got your own cell phone plan. And so right now, you might want to enjoy these days. You living good. Ain't got no rent, no bills, enjoying cable, leave all the lights on in the house. Y'all living well. But Moses says, I got to learn, God, you got to teach me how to live well. Since I can't determine how long I'm going to live, I got to live well. And he asked God to teach us how to live well. And reading this psalm and Moses' prayer, there are several lessons in terms of living well. And it starts with two acknowledgments that we have to make. One, living well requires acknowledging limits. Limits. The wise life, the whole life, the well life is the life that has to come to terms with limits. You see, to be human is to live and be subject to limitations. One of the points of God instructing Adam in the garden that he's free to eat of everything except one thing is to let Adam know that freedom and dominion exist within limitation. That God not only forbade Adam from eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil because of what the fruit would produce, but also God was setting the boundary between Adam and God. Now God has to do this for Adam because he needs Adam to know life is lived within boundaries, and so that Adam would also be able to teach his children that. You got to remember, Adam was created and he was full grown. But as a full grown man, he needed to know he had limitations. And what we as parents have to be able to teach our children is, number one, there's a difference between me and you. Yeah, there is a difference. There's a difference between me and you, and the difference is, number one, I set the policy. I set the rules. I set the boundary. And the reason why it's important for parents to set boundaries for children now is so they won't go out into the world thinking there are no boundaries for them and there are no limitations. No. Life is full of boundaries, full of limitations. And no amount of wealth, power, or fame will exceed the limits of our humanity. We're finite. We have a beginning and we have an end. And you know, we do our best to push the envelope, but try as we might, the envelope still has corners and edges. that we cannot avoid. There is but so far that you can reach, so much that you can carry, so much that you can stand, so much that you can take, so much that you can handle, so much that you can control. Life lived well is life acknowledging limitations. But there's something else that we have to acknowledge. Living well requires acknowledging our frailty. Our lives are not just characterized by limitation and finitude, but also by frailty. We are creatures of dust. Our frames are merely held together by a combination of water, moving atoms and molecules that are moving so fast within each other, and mercy and grace. We are corruptible and we are mortal. We are subject to disease and disaster. You can pay your money for a cruise, go on a cruise, and that cruise ship now become your jail cell because you're subject to disease. We are frail. And as together as we may want people to think that we ain't all that. Will you help somebody just tell them you ain't all that? I'm just telling you what the Bible says. You're not all that. It's right there in the Bible. James chapter 4 verse 13, the Message translation reads, "And now I've got a word for you who brashly announce today at the latest tomorrow we're off to such and such a city for the year. We're going to start a business and make a lot of money." Then James says, you don't know the first thing about tomorrow. You're nothing but a wisp of fog catching a brief bit of sun before disappearing. Do you hear James's response to those who assume a level of control over their lives? Douglas D. Webster observes that their assumption of control is multi-level. The assumption of control of time when they say, this is what we're going to do tomorrow. There's the assumption of control of purpose in the words, we're going to. There's the assumption of control of place when they say we're going to go off to such and such a city. There's the assumption of control of goals in the words, we're going to start a business. And finally, there's the assumption of the control of reward when they say, in other words, make a lot of money. Now, there's nothing wrong with having goals. Nothing wrong with having ambition. Nothing wrong with having purpose. Nothing wrong with having drive. You've got to have all of that. But understand, that is all that it is. Goal, purpose, ambition, drive. There is still something that is outside of your control. And how frail we really are. That's why James concludes these words. He says, now, do you understand who you really are? He says, catch this, you are nothing but. Wow. Now I can stop right there. Their thinking that they knew more than they knew was due to their thinking that they were more than they were. And James checks him on the point by saying, you're not all that. You are nothing but vapor, a wisp, a fog. Do you know what a vapor is? A vapor is faint, diffuse. A vapor lacks material substance or permanence. It's only here for a moment and vanishes away. And though it may have the same elemental properties as water or ice, vapor doesn't last as long as water or ice. It should not confuse itself as water or ice. They need not be deceived by that which is external to them as making them more than what they are. They are vapor, a wisp of fog. Is that a wake-up call to somebody? Nothing but vapor, a wisp of fog. Look at somebody and say, dressed up vapor. Looking good vapor. In other words, don't confuse your title. Don't confuse your position. Don't confuse your business cards. Don't confuse your achievements. Don't confuse your attainments. Don't confuse any of them as making you more than who you are. You are nothing but vapor. Vapor with a title. Vapor with an office. Vapor with a business. Vapor with a clergy collar. Vapor with an achievement. Vapor. That's all that we. Catching a brief bit of sun before disappearing. You're here today, gone tomorrow. And in some cases, you can be here today and gone today. Life is frail. Life is frail. I mean, you can be caught by an aneurysm, not even know it. You know, when we would hear our grandparents talk about blood running warm through my veins, and we thought, how country is that? Until you discover that a blood clot could keep the blood from running. And then you realize how wise that really is for the Lord to keep the blood running unhinderedly through your veins. Life is frail. And the longer that you live, the more aware you become of the frailty of life. You know, when you're young, you ain't afraid of nothing. When I was a kid and we be on an airplane and we go through turbulence, that'd be fun for me. I'd be laughing. Other folk would be praying. I'd be laughing because I didn't know what to fear. But let me tell you, Thursday night when I was trying to get back to Charlotte and that plane was doing, wasn't nothing fun about that. Father, I stretch my hands to thee. No other help I know. Right? Because the more aware you are of the frailty of life, the more that you don't take things for granted, and it's in such an awareness that you have a greater appreciation for the life that you now enjoy. Again, you know, in your younger years, you don't know what to fear, you don't know what to appreciate, because you really don't know how precious what you have really is. You don't know how tentative what you enjoy really is. But when you got some miles on your tires, and when you've seen a few more risings and settings of the sun, as the saints would say, and when you've witnessed some of those who started with you no longer being alive or being in situations that they never thought that they would be in, you have a greater appreciation for the life that you have, because you realize it could have been you outdoors with no shoes and no clothes, all left alone without one friend, just another number with a tragic end. But God didn't let anything fit to let any of those things be. But by his grace and his power, the Lord has kept you. Is there anyone here who realizes how frail life is, and therefore the more that you appreciate the life that you have? I appreciate taking off and landing more. I appreciate starting to drive and arriving where I'm going. I appreciate going to sleep and waking up in the morning. I better understand why somebody could shout off the words. The word, he woke me up this morning, started me on my way, didn't let me sleep too late, but woke me up on time. He woke me up this morning and started me on my way. The Lord is blessing me right now. Now, I wonder, is there anybody here who, when you think about people going into the operating room and they didn't come out, but you did? When you think about people who were in accidents and they didn't survive, but you did, you ought to tell the Lord, thank you. I appreciate the life I have. It may not be everything that I want, but I'm so glad I got the life that I have, because I realize that life could have been over. Hallelujah. And so we've got to acknowledge our limits. We've got to acknowledge our frailty. And for some people, acknowledging the limits and frailty is a cause for anxiety and fear. But Moses shows us how to make acknowledging your limitations and your frailty worshipful. Because living well requires trusting God with your limitations and with your frailty. You see, by ourselves, frailty, finitude can be disquieting and disconcerting. But a relationship with God enables you to put your finitude, your limitation, put your frailty and your weakness into a larger frame. God, who is eternal, God who is everlasting. That's what we learned in that song early in our lives. Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. Little ones to him belong. They are weak, but he is strong. As you acknowledge your weakness, but you put it in a bigger frame by knowing that God is strong. Look at the frame that Moses puts considering his limitations and his frailty into. Lord, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations before the mountain was born, or you brought forth the whole world from everlasting to everlasting. You are God. In other words, Moses says, I'm putting my limitation and my frailty, and I'm putting it in the frame because I'm trusting God to be my strength and my help. The root for dwelling place means help and strength. He starts out by remembering what God did for Abram and Sarai. Abram and Sarai in their frailty, in their limitation, in their old age, unable to bear a child. Abraham, in the midst of that, God reveals himself as El Shaddai, the strong-breasted, the almighty, the more than enough God. And then what God does is he takes one letter from his name, Yahweh, the letter H, and he now attaches it to Abram and makes him Abraham, and takes it and attaches it to Sarai and makes her Sarah. And he does this to let them know, I'm now investing myself in you so that I can produce what you can't produce on your own. Lord have mercy. I'm going to bring about through you what you cannot bring about through yourself. God is the God who strengthened them to be able to produce Isaac. God is the God who strengthened the children of Israel in bondage and allowed them to produce bricks without straw and empowered them to multiply. As a matter of fact, the more they were afflicted, the more they multiplied. I'm talking to somebody right now, because somebody can testify in the midst of your limitation, in the midst of your frailty, God has been your help and your strength. That is the history of black people in America. In the midst of our inability, our weakness, our lack of capacity and agency, in the midst of the obstacles organized and disorganized against us, God enabled us, God strengthened us, God aided, God assisted, God made possible what was impossible. And like God added his letter to Abram and Sarah, God added himself to the equation of your family and your story. By adding himself to your life, the equation changed, the matter shifted, the door opened, the way was made. Somebody knows by the help of God, resources were found, connections were made, money was stretched, food was empowered, clothes lasted, and a bed was made enough for several children. One pot of greens and some salted meat was enough for a whole week. Mason jars filled with pennies and nickels and dimes were made enough to get you in the school. And once you got in, God made a way for you to stay there and graduate. God is our help. God is our strength. And somebody can testify, he still gives power to the faint, and to those who have no might he increases their strength. And even the youth shall faint and be weary, and the young people shall utterly fall, but they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They'll mount up on wings as eagles. They'll run and not get weary. They'll walk and not faint. Slap five with your neighbor and say, he's been my strength. He's given me strength to face what I gotta face, carry what I gotta carry. When He's renewed me. He's picked me up. He's dusted me off, put me back in the game when I thought I didn't have it, when I wanted to give up. He said, not yet and not now. He's been your strength and our help. There's something else. Something else. Don't just trust him to be your strength and your help, but then living well in the midst of limitation and frailty is trusting God to be your source of safety and security. Dwelling place not only speaks of strength and help, it speaks of God being a place of safety, a place of security, a place of refuge for the believer. Our safety and our security is never geographical. Safety and security are theological. That is to say, don't look for your safety in a place. Look for your safety in a person. Your safety is not in your position. Your safety is in a relationship with a God who is transportable. Safety and security are in the person of God because, friends, when your environment would have destroyed you, when circumstances would have crippled you, if not erased you, God was a refuge and God was a strength. The very place that you thought was going to be the place that was going to be the place that was going to be the place that was going to be the place ended up not being the place to be the place to be the place. And had you trusted that all by yourself and alone, your life would be messed up. But tell your neighbor, when the place was not the place, was not the place, the God who was the God was still the God. And when I had to leave that place, God was with me. Lord have mercy. God was a refuge. God was a shelter. God protected your mind, your heart, and your spirit such that the attempts to depersonalize you and demean you and diminish you did not achieve their ultimate end. Somehow our forebears were able to transcend, to rise above, to overcome, to defy and withstand. And that's been your experience. Somebody can testify and say, my God, I've been in some situations and some environments that they tried to do everything that they could to make me feel small and little and low. And if I did not have a God who was keeping my mind and my heart and my spirit, I would not have made it. But he walked with me. And he talked with me, and he told me that I'm his own. And because of that, I was able to stand. Because of that, I was able to achieve. Because of that, I was able to overcome. Because of that, I was able to transcend. He's been my protection. And what God doesn't keep you from, he's able to keep you in. Slap fire with your neighbor and say, I know that's true. When I've gone through the waters, I wasn't by myself. When I had to face flood, I did not drown. When I went through the fire, the flames did not destroy me. God kept me. When I faced lions, God shut the lions' mouths. As a matter of fact, God prepared a table before me in the presence of my enemies. He anointed my head with oil and caused my cup to run over. As a matter of fact, all that they could do is watch God bless me, watch God elevate me, watch God advance me, watch God further me. Even though they wanted to take me out, God was right there, and they beheld him lift me and prepare me. He is the God who took you in surgery and brought you out of surgery, took you through chemo, brought you out of chemo, brought you through dialysis. He's been with you in the valley of despair and depression. He's brought you out. Is there anybody here who can say, I've got the words of the psalmist, for in the time of trouble, he'll hide me in his pavilion. In the secret place of his tabernacle shall he hide me. He shall set me high upon a rock, and now my head shall be lifted up round about my enemies. He that dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, he is my refuge and my fortress. My God, in him will I trust. Surely he shall deliver me from the snare of the fowler and from the powerful pestilence. He shall cover you with his feathers, and under his wings shall you be able to trust. I just want to let you know, in the midst of your limitation, in the midst of your weakness, you live well when you trust God to be the source of your strength and to be the source of your help. When you put your trust in God, you say, I'm trusting him with what I know and what I don't know.
know, what I see and what I don't see, what I can handle and what I can't handle. I trust God to be enough. I believe God to be sufficient. I believe God to be able. Every now and then I am shaken by my limitation. I'm shaken by my frailty, but I'm so glad I had a mama who learned how to trust God, and she taught me how to trust God. And every now and then I could hear my mama downstairs on her Hammond organ, and she'd start playing some songs, and she'd play the song and she'd sing these words: in my weakness, Lord, be my strength. In my trials all, be thou near me all the day. Hear me when I cry. Leave me not to walk alone, lest I faint and die. Let thy spirit be with me and attend my cry. Keep my heart and keep my hand. Keep my soul, I pray. Keep my tongue to speak thy praise. Keep me all the way. I didn't understand why she was playing the song. I didn't understand why she was singing those words. But now that I've been on my own for a while, and now that I've had my own life with God, I understand what it is to have to ask God, God, I need you to keep me all the way. I don't know how long I've got to live, but I'm going to live well, Lord. And so I'm trusting you to keep me all the way. I'm trusting you to keep me in my ups and in my downs, in my ins and in my outs, in my highs and in my lows, in my good times and in my bad times, in my sick times and in my well times, in times when I got people around me, and times when I'm all by myself. Oh God, will you keep me? And when it's your time to call and mine to answer, oh God, will you keep me? Will you let me hear the words, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I'll dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Am I talking to anybody? Is there anybody who can say, I'm going to trust him, I'm going to rely on him, I'm going to depend on him, and he will strengthen me, he will help me, he will secure me, he will protect me, he will preserve me? Don't know how long. I just want to live well. And I'm going to trust God to be my strength, to be my help. Trust him to be my safety and to be my security.